President Biden is in the land of his ancestors tonight in the Republic of Ireland, reconnecting with his family's historic roots. But it was the present and the future of Northern Ireland that concerned him in his one and only speech there this lunchtime to a young audience who have grown up in the peace that has prevailed since the Good Friday Agreement. His speech was slightly more political than expected. He said he hoped for the return of power sharing, though, of course, he said it was not up to him. He did dangle the prospect of billions more of American investment if the politicians got Stormont started up again. As for the present, this place has been transformed by peace, the president told them, made technicolor by it and made whole. The United States will continue, he said, to be your partner in peace.
Instead of the champagne moment they had hoped for, the two leaders met over tea to discuss what is and perhaps what might have been. Unionists had warned President Biden that cajoling them would worsen the political impasse, and he indicated he'd come to listen. Although Mr. Biden's sister Valerie was talking up the trip,
it's going to be great. Thank you.
The truth is that after it was announced, the president's visit became less ambitious by the day, until in the end he left his Belfast hotel for one public engagement. 25 years after President Bill Clinton helped broker the Good Friday Agreement, President Joe Biden probably imagined this would be some kind of victory lap. Instead, it's a rather subdued and short visit to Belfast. After meeting local political leaders at a new university campus, the president reflected on the agreement reached under the chairmanship of Senator George Mitchell back in 1998.
Every person killed in the Troubles left an empty chair at that dining room table and a hole in the heart that was never filled for the ones they lost. Peace was not inevitable. We can't ever forget that. There was nothing inevitable about it. As George Mitchell often said, the negotiations had, quote, 700 days of failure and 1 day of success.
Careful not to be critical of anyone, he then expressed his wish that power sharing at Stormont be restored.
As a friend, I hope it's not too presumptuous of me to say that I believe democratic institutions established through the Good Friday Agreement remain critical to the future of Northern Ireland. So I hope the Assembly and the Executive will soon be restored. That's a judgment for you to make, not me, but I hope it happens.
Air Force One left Belfast International at lunchtime, its most important passenger's wings slightly clipped by political realities here. Soon afterwards, he was stepping off in Dublin, from where he travelled to County Louth to visit Carlingford Castle, the last landmark his great-great-grandfather Owen Finnegan saw as he set sail for New York.
Mr. President, how does it feel to be here, sir?
Feels wonderful. Feels like I'm coming home.
Then it was on to the town of Dundalk, where his freedom of movement contrasted with his rather constrained time in Belfast. Back in Belfast, people may feel somewhat shortchanged. £7 million spent on a visit lasting just 17 hours. Barely enough time for POTUS, the President of the United States, to require a change of clothes. John Irvine, News at 10, Belfast.
Well, President Biden did tread a careful path through Northern Irish politics, offering encouragement, not instructions to local leaders, as you saw. His diplomacy towards the Democratic Unionists, currently blocking the reopening of the Stormont Assembly, was delicate enough to keep them on side. But some businesses and people clamouring for improvements to their everyday lives told us he should have been tougher.
If the streets around Belfast are reopening in the aftermath of the presidential visit, the road back to power sharing remains firmly closed. But at least President Biden did successfully avoid antagonising the DUP.
He made clear that it's not his job, as we heard in his speech, to take decisions for political leaders in Northern Ireland, but that the United States stands ready to support Northern Ireland in whatever way it can, and so we welcome his visit here today.
The main party leaders here had met President Biden briefly before his speech.
I very much took the opportunity to thank the President and, for the American administration's, long-standing commitment to our peace process, but very much to their commitment for the next 25 years. And he made it very clear in his speech today also that they will be, they're thinking towards investment opportunities.
The Belfast Good Friday Agreement is a priority.
As part of that, the President promised a US trade delegation this year, although for students watching the speech, that's still secondary to having a functioning government.
If you walk around uni, I don't think people are really thinking about trade deals from America. People are thinking about social lives, getting a job, and that cost of living crisis. There's the bread and butter issues.
I'm more concerned about having a government, someone that's actually supporting them, their values. What morals do Northern Ireland really want, especially young people?
Do you think he could have been a bit tougher with the local politicians?
I know there's some controversy about him maybe coming over or what the reaction was to it, but he clearly knew what he was talking about and what to say, and he kept it quite neutral, I suppose, in a way, especially on a thing like Brexit and the Windsor Framework and our political situation.
Although at this logistics business, the boss wonders if a bit more could have been achieved.
Maybe if he was staying here a wee bit longer, he could have put a wee bit more pressure on, but however, it is what it is.
Would you like to have seen him stay a bit longer?
Well, yes, I think he could have spent an extra few hours in the place. It's a fly in and fly out with all the additional costs involved in that and security and the upset and everything else for a few hours.
President Biden's brief visit may not have improved the political situation, but it was a reminder of how far politics has come here. And at least he didn't make it any worse. Carlingford News at 10, Belfast.
The road to the north and the Republic of Ireland is well trodden for American presidents. A long line of hopefuls seeking the crucial Irish-American vote have made the pilgrimage.
And here comes a ticker tape. This looks more like Wall Street.
It was President Kennedy 60 years ago who set the stage. But how significant it actually was in swaying American voters back home, we'll never know, because his triumphant motorcade through Dublin provided a chilling prescient image of what happened just 5 months later, his assassination in an open-top car in Dallas, Texas. Treated like a rock star by adoring crowds, it was another 3 decades before another charismatic president, Bill Clinton, became the first US leader ever to visit Northern Ireland. He took the historic opportunity to speak in support of the Northern Irish peace process, helping to drag the IRA out of violence and paving the way for the Good Friday Agreement, which followed 3 years later. His role at that time has always been seen as critical in persuading the IRA to trust the process. With peace in Northern Ireland secured, Barack Obama's short stopover in the Republic to showcase his family's Irish history and his love of Guinness was less to do with the Troubles and more about the 40 million or so American voters who claim Irish ancestry. Donald Trump's mother is a Scot, not Irish, but he still flew to the Republic during a transatlantic trip and after visiting his luxury golf course caused political consternation by referring to the border with the North as a wall, which of course it isn't, as the Irish Prime Minister was very quick to clarify. Where would you start? Now, in a moment, we'll speak to John in Belfast. But first, let's just go to Rachel in Dublin. Rachel, you've been following the President all day. As I was saying, you might argue the real audience for this is not there, or indeed north of the border, but back home in America.
Yeah, I think you have a good point with that, and certainly there was an enormous contrast between his visits in Northern Ireland this morning and what happened when he then crossed the border. It was the most glorious morning in Northern Ireland, and yet it was the most fleeting of visits, no time penciled in to meet any of the public really out on the streets, and the city responded to that by largely going about its business as usual. It felt to me like he was choosing every word very carefully, aware of political stalemate there, the delicate situation, and also the degree of distrust with which some unionists hold him in. And that's because he spends so much time talking about his connections to Ireland and his Irish heritage. And then once he was over the border, everything changed. He just seemed to relax. The weather closed in, it was absolutely atrocious, but I met people in Dundalk who've been queuing for hours in the wind and the rain just to get a glimpse of him. Now, he responded by getting out and about, shaking hands for over 10 minutes in the driving rain. You can imagine how tense his security detail was at that point. But I think you're right, Tom, there is a reason why we see so many American presidents who are intending to run for a second term coming over to the island of Ireland at around that point. The warmth of the welcome he got, that will have played very well back at home, where there are 40 million Irish Americans whose vote he would like. And I think even at his age, even in the atrocious weather conditions, that alone was worth braving the weather conditions for here.
OK, Rachel, thank you very much indeed. Well, let's, John, maybe we can come to you. I was thinking as we came on air, when we first started working together in that tiny office in Ulster Television more than 30 years ago, if someone had walked in that first day and said, you know, we would see peace come to Northern Ireland, that it would endure, I don't think either of us would have believed it. It's been inspiring, it's been hopeful, it's been amazing. Where are we, do you think, 25 years on from the Good Friday Agreement?
Tom, Northern Ireland is simply unrecognisable from the place it was during the Troubles. And of course it was a fear of a return to those dark days that provided the greatest impetus for the politicians trying to thrash out an agreement 25 years ago. And they were under enormous pressure, facing the starkest of choices. There weren't any halfway houses, just two options: success or disaster, a deal by Good Friday or back to bombs and bullets on Saturday. And of course they made the brave compromises and reached the merciful agreement that we're remembering this week. During the 30 years of the Troubles, Tom, more than 3,700 people were killed here. And frankly, had the killings continued at that rate, then more than 2,000 people who are alive today would not be, were it not for the Good Friday Agreement. That is an irrefutable truth and ultimately the bottom line.
Well, let's just talk about this visit. You know, we've drawn a lot of comparisons with the Clinton visit, different time, different context. But, you know, Northern Ireland still has its political problems. Will this visit, in your judgment, end up making any difference at all?
It had to be a Hippocratic visit. First, Mr. President, do no harm. And I think Joe Biden managed to achieve that. But to do that, it had to be rather brief and low-key, with the one bright exception being that excellent speech at the Ulster University. I think President Biden very deftly tiptoed through the minefield that is Northern Ireland politics. He said, look, it's up to you. If you want to restore the assembly, then please do so. It's not up to me. But if you do manage it, there are business people and investors queuing up from America to bring money here. But that's up to you.
John, it's great to have you back there for this. Thank you very much indeed.